If you ask any Fortnite player what their favorite seasons are, there's a strong chance they will often say that Chapter 2 Season 4 is a top 5 or even top 3 season. This is for good reason, because despite the fact that many people can have a very skewed perception when it comes to what they view as a good season.
That is a 9.7 out of 10. I'm telling you, it's a top 5, maybe even top 3 season of all time.
Chapter 2 Season 4 is a season that holds up to the praise that it receives later on. Because I've played every season up to this point, at the time I was feeling very burnt out when Season 3 of Chapter 2 was coming to a close. The idea of a Marvel collab-themed season seemed like the perfect jumping off point, as I had no faith that Epic would deliver on creating something that was interesting beyond that thing I like to watch sometimes is in the game that I'm playing.
You're Ralph Boner?
However, with the launch of the season and subsequently the following updates throughout the season, I was very surprised with the very positive direction that Epic decided to take this season in, with the plethora of phenomenal additions and changes surrounding this season. To help you understand the types of changes that I'm talking about, you need to know that I base these season reviews off of 3 main categories: map changes, loot pool, and overall content/quality of life changes. With the launch of Season 4, the map changes were rather small at first, with the biggest change being the slight revamp of Pleasant Park to Doom's Domain. These changes improved a few different sections to Pleasant Park that made it a better POI. Specifically, the far center building was changed to fit the theme of Doom's Domain, and the soccer field at the middle of the POI was revealed to have a secret IO style base that added some extra loot in an interesting way to an area of the POI that didn't house much to begin with. Now, despite these changes being small, they were still great additions, and in the very next update, 14.10, Epic added one of the largest mid-season map changes of all time with the Stark Industries biome. Prior to this point in Chapter 2, Epic had strayed away from the idea of affecting large portions of the map with their season updates. While a good number of the changes during Season 2 added great POIs that were some of the best changes during the chapter to the map, there's no doubt that most of the time when Epic decides to revamp a portion of the map, it often ends up being more impactful than the addition of a group of POIs. This is because with these rework style changes to areas of the map, they will often add a new biome that encompasses not only a group of new POIs, but also new terrain changes with it, making the map feel unique. Now, naturally, Epic doesn't always make great decisions with their biome additions, with Season 5 making no real change to terraform the map, but rather painting over what we already see with sand.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
However, luckily, the Stark Industries biome adds a style of terrain that is unique to this season. Because the theme this season was going for with transporting structures and land masses across dimensions, it gave these different POIs a bowl cutout style shape that added some interesting aspects to the different rotation during this season. When trying to rotate into or out of the Stark Industries POI, it was made especially difficult by the elevation of the landmass. This meant you would mainly have to be funneled in and out through ziplines, making third parties come from in only few select locations of the POI. Apart from the massive terrain changes, the new landmass also featured a main Stark Industries building, as well as a smaller non-named location that was meant to be Tony Stark's house. The Stark Industries POI itself at the time was one of the most dense POIs with loot, as well as being one of the few locations this season to have a vault dedicated to it. This, combined with the loot that was exclusive to the location, made Stark Industries one of the most heavily landed POIs during this season. It's unfortunate because POIs and locations surrounding collaborations are usually very strong locations that inevitably get removed before the end of the chapter or even season. Before this season, we had Gotham City and the Borderlands POI, and more recently the Daily Bugle from Chapter 3. These landmarks are often remembered as being great POIs because of the loot, features, and general uniqueness surrounding them. However, because they are made for collaborations based on a contract for a set period of time, they inevitably get removed by the end of the season or before the end of the chapter. Other than these POI changes, the only other significant change during this season were the Quinjet patrol sites that would spawn in random areas on the map. Beyond adding a little bit of extra loot, these patrol sites gave an easy way to obtain the new Stark rifle, which was the best AR this season. The loot pool this season is among the best we have ever seen, and it's the biggest part of what I love about Chapter 2 Season 4. When most people think about what makes the season's loot pool so incredible, most players will refer back to the Stark rifle or the many different mythics that were added into the game this season. While both of these loot pool additions were great in their own way, by far the largest part of the loot pool for me were the shotguns. Unlike most shotgun loot pools that we will often see, the 2 main shotguns available during this season added an interesting aspect behind choosing which shotgun you wanted to run. A shotgun loot pool such as the TAC and pump shotgun, while good, clearly leans in the direction of the pump shotgun being the more superior weapon, as most players prefer the way that the pump shotgun functions with its heavy damage and slightly farther range compared to the TAC. However, Epic did something very different with the shotgun loot pool in Season 4, and they were able to achieve a near perfect shotgun loot pool with the weapon they introduced during Season 3, the charged shotgun.
This is a load of barnacles.
Just hear me out. You can often notice that when Epic wants you to get familiar with a new shotgun, they will often replace the pump or the main shotgun in the loot pool with whatever weapon they are trying to promote. In Season 9, people were initially very upset with the removal of the pump shotgun that got replaced with the combat shotgun. However, after some adjustments to the weapon, and furthermore a long period of time where players were forced to use the combat shotgun over the pump, players began to improve with the weapon. They got more and more used to using the shotgun to the extent that when the pump was re-added during the same season, most players would prefer to use the combat over it. We see a very similar thing happen here in Season 3 of Chapter 2, with the addition of the charged shotgun annoying players at first, but as the season progresses, many players began to understand the weapon for its true capabilities and improve with it. This alone meant that when Epic decided to add the pump back into the game the following season, players were now more comfortable with using the charged shotgun over the pump. However, with all of this being said, there were still an equally large number of players willing to use the pump shotgun over the charged. This created a choice that was previously vacant from shotgun loot pools that gave players the option to not have to pick between two shotguns where one was the obvious choice.
Come with me if you want to live.
But rather to choose between two weapons where running one over the other was more of a preference than anything. Because the charged shotgun offered a much higher damage point than the pump when fully charged, most people would sacrifice some of the consistency that came with using the pump shotgun to get that higher damage. At the same time, a good number of players were more comfortable with using the pump as they felt it was more consistent and less situational, and they didn't want to sacrifice hitting their shots for a little extra damage. I know I rambled quite a bit about these two weapons, but they genuinely created an experience in the shotgun loot pool like no other that we've seen, and it's unfortunate that future seasons haven't been able to replicate its superiority. Now, I did mention that the shotgun loot pool this season was nearly perfect, and my inability to call it perfect stems from the fact that Epic added the tickle gun into the game during this season. For anyone unaware, the tickle gun is a shell of what the combat shotgun used to be. I think if the intention this season was to add an extra functioning shotgun into the game, it would have been a better decision to pick something like the tactical shotgun that was a more casual friendly weapon. Instead, Epic opted for the tickle gun, and with its addition, it really only served the purpose of being the ugly middle child of the shotgun loot pool, as this weapon was completely terrible. Apart from this one weapon, the rest of the loot pool this season was great. The new mythics were all unique in their own way, and each of them was powerful enough to justify using them. Often we will see the addition of rather lackluster mythics, and it will end up depleting the value of landing locations associated with them. These mythics each were themed around different Marvel heroes, giving you one of their many abilities to use in fights. The new AR this season, also being themed around the Marvel aesthetic, the new Stark rifle, is one of my favorite ARs that they have ever added into the game. This weapon acted as an infantry rifle that when hip firing would allow you to fire much faster, promoting the idea of running one AR rather than an AR and an SMG. Speaking of SMGs, the two main in the loot pool this season were the TAC SMG and the suppressed SMG, which were both weapons during the season that were powerful and fun to use but not broken. There were a good number of pre-existing weapons in the game during this season, such as the revolver and the LMG. However, these guns didn't really impact much of the overall loot pool. This season's loot pool by far thrived off of the many new additions as well as the numerous unvaults during this season. Fortnitemares, while it took place during the closing half of this season, added some interesting content with the addition of a destroyed authority that, while I wasn't necessarily a big fan of, did give a better reason for people to land there with the new Halloween-themed Midas NPC that gave a slightly nerfed version of his drum gun. From October 21st to November 3rd, you could get the Witch Broom, the Jack-O-Launcher, the Finned Hunter crossbow, Shadow Midas's drum gun, as well as a plethora of candy consumables that would offer different perks upon consuming them. Compared to more recent Fortnitemares, this one held up pretty well, and the theme of Midas's revenge allowed for a bit of a boost to a POI that no one really landed anymore. One of the early additions this season was the new Whiplash Mark 51 cars. These vehicles had infinite gas, better handling off-road, and rechargeable boosts that were all features that made this vehicle phenomenal for rotation. Often when Epic adds something to the game that works well for rotation, there will be some broken gimmick behind it, and it's nice to say that the new Mark 51 Whiplash really had none to speak of. One of the mid-season additions were the Galactus Gorgers that spawned small drones that, upon destroying, could function as a weapon to help you kill one of the Galactus Gorgers. However, you seemingly couldn't run this weapon in your inventory, so I'm not really sure what the point of using it was. The nice thing was, upon killing one of these Galactus Gorgers, it dropped a pretty large amount of loot, ranging from common loot to gold loot, with a good amount of extra resources with it. The biggest quality of life related change this season for me was the major split between the competitive and public lobbies loot pool. Even though the arena system was very flawed, one of the major things that would often benefit the mode was when Epic created some division with the loot pool. This isn't something that's always consistent with the arena system. However, more often than not during certain seasons in Chapter 2, Epic does make an attempt to separate the two loot pools, and no season does it better than Season 4. A good number of the less competitive changes this season, such as the different AIs like the Galactus Gorgers, as well as the mythic items, never saw competitive. This alone not only made Season 4 a phenomenal season for players who wanted to play the game more casually, but also a great competitive experience for those players that wanted to play the game more competitively. At the end of the day, Chapter 2 Season 4 proves that Epic is more than capable of creating an experience that not only appeals to casual players but more competitive ones as well. They were able to do this not only by separation of the loot pools this season, but also a great amount of meaningful content, loot pool changes, and map changes that all built towards cementing the season as one of the greatest of all time. It's unfortunate that our standards for a good season have seemingly dipped so far since then. When people tell me that they think the best season of all time is Chapter 3 Season 1, it's very confusing as this season just doesn't come anywhere near the excellence of Chapter 2 Season 4. After Season 4, Epic dropped many stinkers, and I think it caused a lot of people to lower their standards for what makes a good season.
This is the worst.
And often when Epic does improve upon a certain category of the game, people will praise them for doing the bare minimum of addressing garbage that should have never been in the game in the first place. Regardless, Season 4 of Chapter 2 is definitely one of my favorite seasons of all time, and I would rank it a 9.4 out of 10. Let me know what you would personally rank Season 4 down in the comments below. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a great day.